rebels. Total rebels. I like them. I like them.
Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Glam Bodybuilding, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about range of motion. I know I've talked about this a lot of times, and we spent a lot of times on this subject, but one thing I want to bludgeon into you is the fact that muscle growth or muscle adaptation is extremely simple. It's made to be overcomplicated, and of course there are many ways that you can adjust how you train a muscle, such as with range of motion and stretch and different positioning and stuff, which is still relevant, right? All of those techniques are relevant, but one thing I find is that people get hung up on one particular technique, such as parallel squats or full range. You got to touch the chest of the bar in order for it to be effective or whatever, and there is this idealism out there that says that if you do not do or use a certain technique, that you cannot get results. Now, that's absolutely totally the furthest thing from the truth that you can possibly say, because if a muscle is contracting and it is hitting failure in an anaerobic window, right? You know, a minute to 2 minutes, it is going to adapt. If it's contracting and it is relaxing under eccentric load, right? It's not just, you know, falling down or whatever, but there's actual muscular damage happening and the muscle is hitting failure, there will be muscle growth, period. Now, some people think, oh yeah, well, you know, if it's only this range of motion, there's going to be no muscle growth whatsoever as opposed to that. And again, it depends on how you're built, depends on where your insertion points are, and it depends also which muscle group you're talking about. Because I can take somebody and move them through a certain range of motion and certain muscles will be activated as opposed to others with them, and then you take somebody else and they're going to have different proprioception, different muscles being activated through the same range of motion because their proportions are slightly different. So this is why it's important for you to pay attention to your own body type. And I'm not saying it's not good to do full range of motion here and there, but again, full range of motion that's passive and full range of motion that's active, basically range of motion under load, that's going to be different than passive range of motion, which means, you know, I can move my shoulder joint in any one direction, whatever. I mean, obviously I'm not going to be using the same type of tension that way. It's kind of like throwing a ball. If I throw a cannonball like this, I'll dislocate a shoulder, right? So it's the same way when it comes down to bench pressing or moving in any one direction. If you are using a range of motion that is not necessarily in alignment with your body's ability to keep stability in that joint and to keep it strong and to keep the integrity there, you are going to injure it. And there are certain ranges of motion that it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to injure the joint. Most of us will injure it no matter what, no matter how much rotator cuff exercises you do, no matter what you do, you're going to injure yourself because it's like jujitsu. It's just the wrong range of motion. It's just not efficient, right? So all I'm trying to say is that as much as I advocate stretch and constant tension under stretch in the muscle belly, right? So that's why you see me do the constant tension type reps and stuff. I also will say that partial reps or like rack pulls, you know, these types of lifts are still very valid because they're putting a muscle under stress. And when a muscle is under stress and it hits fatigue, it is going to grow. And you're going to notice that using differing ranges of motion with different exercises, you're going to find that there's going to be certain muscles that are under stress as opposed to other ones, which is why it's good to do different ranges and experiment and say, oh wow, you know, I want to really hit the shoulders more in this pressing movement today than the upper chest or whatever. And you can basically experiment with what type of press you're going to do based on what you want to hit. So some people think, hey, if I do an incline press, it's naturally upper chest. Well, maybe not. Maybe with you, when you do an incline press full range, locking out of the top and all the way to the bottom, you might be hitting more shoulders or more triceps as opposed to as much of the chest when you're doing constant tension, right? So you can use the same exercise that's classified as a chest movement, and it can all of a sudden become a tricep movement depending on the range of motion you're using and depending on what muscle is hitting failure first. But again, the thing you want to come back to is the understanding that as long as something is fatiguing, something is hitting failure, and something is being challenged, it is going to adapt, which is why, like I said before in my previous video from yesterday, or 2 days ago, whenever I put this video up, but in the previous video, I did squats wrong my whole life, but it actually was right because that's how I grew, you know, some of the biggest pairs of legs in natural bodybuilding. I was up there with anybody on stage. So it's a matter of working with your body type, and it's also working with the understanding that there is a range of motion that is going to hit muscles and take them to failure, and then there's a range of motion that injures you. And again, that's going to be different from individual to individual, but there is the use of efficient range of motion, because first what I'm trying to do is break your fanatical thinking about an exercise has to look exactly a certain way. Then secondly, there is a way for you to perform an exercise to hit a certain muscle group. And thirdly, there is a way for you to perform an exercise to make sure that your muscles are hitting failure and not just your joints fatiguing, or you just basically hitting the wrong muscle. You know, maybe you're basically hitting the medialis around the knee and you want the overall sweep of the quadricep to hit failure when you're squatting, right? So how do you move then? And only through experimentation will you find out what is the ideal range of motion where you hit the most amount of muscle groups with the least amount of joint pain, and you ensure that you hit muscular failure. Now, whether that's 4 inches of movement or whether that's 2 feet of movement, it's really going to be based on how you're built and what it is that you want to hit at the time. And also it's going to be based on the insertion points and where your muscles attach as opposed to others, right? The lever arms and how all these forces play out. So for myself, of course, I've waged the battle on the internet that, hey, muscle fatigue causes growth, right? And whether it's ideal growth or not, it's only going to be discovered through your own experimentation. So by all means, stretch that muscle belly. Yeah, you know, that's why I do incline curls for biceps. That's why I do incline skull crushers for triceps. I am trying to stretch those muscle bellies, and I do get better results doing that. But there are going to be certain muscle groups where you find that the stretch position might be putting you in a weird sort of joint vulnerability. You know what I'm saying? Like for me to do front squats just kills my knees. No matter which way I do it, although it stretches the quads pretty well, it just kills my knees. And no matter how many times I've tried it over 30-something years, it just does not work for me. I find I just get a lot of knee stress. And even high bar squats are not the right thing for me, right? So I usually have to land on a medium to low bar squat in order for me to keep the stress on the ideal place on my body when I squat. Now, it doesn't look pretty, it's not like a Tom Platt squat, but it does create stress on the overall system, which creates an anabolic hormonal response in my body. And at the same time, I do grow really good ass and hamstrings, and I get an awesome sweep on the quads from it. So this took a lot of experimentation from me, right? And I naturally fell into this. So your nature, as you train, your nature will become revealed to you. It's like you will reveal your nature to yourself and see the natural movement that emerges from within you. And then from there, you will fall into something that is more akin to efficient training instead of dogmatic training. That's very wise. Those words are so wise. There's such wisdom here. It's too bad nobody watches these videos. Oh well, more gains for us, huh? That's right. Okay. Well, anyway, I hope this helped out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now.